welcome to Assistive Technology to Support Writing, Session 1, Assessment and Documentation of Need. I'm Corinne Hauer, one of the Assistive Technology Consultants here at the Muskegon Area ISD.
And I'm Jim Capilla, and thank God we're not talking about Adobe Connect. But anyway, moving on.
That's right. As just a quick review of the series, some things to keep in mind where this is part of a 4-part series. The webinars will be approximately 45 minutes in length, and we are offering optional face-to-face follow-ups. Our first session today is an assessment and documentation of need for writing supports with a follow-up on November 10th. That's next Tuesday. Next session will be, these are the new session dates. Feedback from the group was that those dates would work, and we feel that this will be a benefit to all the participants involved with getting you the information in a more timely fashion and getting support out to students sooner. So that second session will be December 1st with a follow-up on December 8th, and with a third session on word prediction and spelling supports on January 5th with a follow-up on January 12th, the face-to-face follow-up, and the last one on tools for supporting organization of writing on February 2nd for the webinar date and February 9th for the face-to-face follow-up. So just a note before we get started, please feel free to use that chat window if you have any questions or anything that you need to ask one of us. If you have something that you want to offer as feedback to the group, we encourage that as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First thing we want to do is talk just briefly about the influence of handwriting on composition. These illustrations or images are just meant to illustrate to you the idea of, remind us that handwriting is very fluent and doesn't take a lot of our cognitive processes, but to students who are emergent writers or students who struggle with writing composition, oftentimes the mechanical processes of handwriting, actually getting letters and words down on paper, can take an enormous amount of cognitive processes, which can feel like balancing a huge load or juggling multiple balls in the air at the same time. So these are just a few of the quotes from research about handwriting and mechanical demands, and what these quotes really just reinforce is that that children who can't keep pace with writing because they are focusing on letter formation or spelling, that's impeding their working memory, and it doesn't allow them to use that working memory to then focus on the linguistics, the ideas, the planning and organization of their writing. When they talk about transcription-related measures, that includes handwriting, it can include keyboarding, and also spelling. And that those are really strong predictors of quality of writing composition in children. So the better students are at being fluent in getting things down on paper, whether it be through handwriting or be through keyboarding, the better their quality of writing composition, planning, organization, ideas, and language is. So we're going to go ahead, moving along, look at some of those components of transcription that we don't often think about. Again, I'm using that term transcription, thinking about both handwriting, keyboarding, and spelling. There are several factors, and these aren't exhaustive factors, but some of the more prominent factors or components associated with transcription include orthographic knowledge, so their ability to retrieve letter combinations and words from memory, not having to have that written example or a visual model in front of them, their ability to form letters or their knowledge of key location, their handwriting or keyboarding speeds, and as well as their spelling abilities. So for students who demonstrate difficulty with any of these components or multiple components, some of the evidence that you might see includes poor legibility, decreased quantity of writing, difficulty keeping pace with writing, difficulty maintaining ideas and organization, again because of that link to their working memory being overtaxed by just getting the ideas down on the paper or out on the keyboard. Limited variation in topic and sentence structure. This often happens when students, again, can't devote a lot of thought to planning variation in their topic. So they'll choose something that they're really familiar with They'll choose language in terms of limited vocabulary, use language and words that are easy to spell, and then as well as obviously poor spelling. So one thing to keep in mind that I think is a really eye-opening statistic is that it's estimated about 80% of students with learning disabilities struggle with written language. So this is looking at a high portion of the students that we work with. So we're going to look next at some methods and processes to evaluate deficits in the area of transcription. So this next process is really looking specifically at handwriting and keyboarding. One of the things that you might do is gather information from relevant team members. So you might be able to get some of the information that we'll go over in these assessments just by talking to the team members. Particularly if the student has been receiving services from an occupational therapist, he or she might have that information available. If not, there are informal handwriting and keyboarding inventories. A couple of them that we're going to look at that we have access to, one is the written productivity profile that was from the Hyatt team, which out of Montgomery County in Maryland, and as well as the Denise DeCoste writing profile or writing protocol. So both of the writing productivity profile and the DeCoste writing protocol follow the same steps. We're going to look at those, just an overview of those steps. You definitely can get an idea of what the process looks like just by going through the overview. If you want more in-depth information on how to do this and to be able to walk through it, that's what we're going to be doing in our face-to-face follow-up session. We'll also offer an opportunity for you to look at the DeCoste protocol, which includes some additional resources that might benefit you in terms of getting those assessments accomplished. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But in essence, what you're looking at, you're starting to look at handwriting in terms of what the student is able to produce in terms of writing the alphabet from memory for a minute, timing a copied sentence for 1 minute, handwriting a sentence from dictation that you dictate for a minute, handwriting the copied sentence quickly. That's only part of the DeCoste protocol and based on some newer research, and as well as looking at composition and handwriting text measured in 1 minute intervals. So in that last portion, you would be asking the student to write about a topic you either give them or a topic that the student selects, and allow them to write about that until they are finished and measure, just make a note of where they are at each 1 minute interval. The next couple of slides look at writing norms by age. So this slide looks at alphabet writing norms by age. So for that alphabet writing task, again, a visual model is not present, so you really want to know about the student's orthographic knowledge. Can they visualize and produce those letters automatically and in sequence of the alphabet without having a visual model present? Because that is strongly linked with a student's composition fluency. Just a note about these next couple of slides about writing norms. They are norms for typically developing students, and research demonstrates that students with learning and other disabilities will have been shown to have writing speeds that are slower than what is expected for typical developing students. So just keep that in mind. This speed, again, handwriting speed for the best copy, so not the fast copy task that we looked at in the DeCoste protocol, but the first best copy task where you ask a student to do their best at copying a near-point sentence. And this gives it both by grade level as well as by gender, because there is a difference. They have found a significant difference between boys and girls in these speeds. So these just give you something to measure against if you're looking at what should be expected of students by grade level in terms of their handwriting fluency and speeds, and identify where your student might be experiencing some difficulty. The next portion, once
Had a question that maybe you can answer, Corinne.
Sure.
Ashley wants to know if they get through the whole alphabet before the minute is done, do they start over?
Yes, you do, absolutely. So each of the first, I'm trying to look at the 3, 4, so the writing the alphabet, the writing the copied sentence, the writing the dictated sentence, and the fast copy, those are all timed for exactly 1 minute. So if the student gets through the entire sentence or through the entire alphabet in 1 minute, they start over until that minute is finished. Also, if they don't make it through the entire alphabet or through the entire sentence in that 1 minute, you stop them at whatever point they're at the end of a minute. So, yes, good question. Thanks. For keyboarding, this next section is looking at what a student, so it's looking at discrepancies between what a student is able to produce with keyboarding versus what they're able to produce in terms of handwriting. It basically goes through the exact same process as you would have completed in the handwriting assessment portion, but obviously you're giving a student access to a keyboard during this time. Some things to keep in mind is you want to make sure that the student does not have access to any auto word completion, word prediction, spell check. All of those features should be turned off during this portion of the assessment. Even the spell check, because for students who get hung up on that little red underline of the words, although it doesn't fix the word for them, some students that will impede how quickly they can get through those exercises because they can't move past. They know that the word is wrong because of the red underline, and it impedes their ability to proceed with the assessment process. So, notes on keyboarding and keyboarding instruction. Like we have the normative data for the handwriting speeds, because there's such vast differences in what's available to students in terms of keyboarding instruction and expectations for keyboarding, and especially in the elementary grades. There isn't any normative data for what elementary age students should be able to do in terms of keyboarding. What they do know is that without keyboarding instruction that results in fluency, that writing using a keyboard potentially hinders that writing quality. That's not to say that students who experience difficulty with handwriting and experience difficulty with keyboarding shouldn't have access to a keyboard. It just reinforces the fact that they need systematic instruction on keyboarding to help build fluency, to help get them past that mechanical portion of learning of keyboarding, and so that they can focus on composition. And again, in most cases, keyboarding speeds need to be commensurate with handwriting speeds in order to be a viable means of transcription. So as a side note to that, the exceptions to this would include students whose writing legibility is so poor that it interrupts either a reader's interpretation, so it's not legible, it's not able to be read, their handwriting isn't able to be read by teachers or peers. Also, some students who aren't able to write legibly and produce legible letters at all, as well as students whose legibility impacts their own ability to go back and revise and edit because they have difficulty deciphering their own handwriting. So just to keep in mind that even though some students might write quickly, if it's completely illegible, they may need to rely on keyboarding, even if it's a slower means. So once you've completed those first two processes in the assessment, what you're going to do is look at those writing samples, both handwriting and keyboarding, and you're looking for any of the following discrepancies in the following areas. Obviously, legibility. You're looking at differences in speed, differences in spelling, even without word prediction and spelling supports using a word processor or a keyboard. Some students will have an easier time spelling just because they're not using so much cognitive effort or working memory towards how to form the letters and getting them down on the page. Also look at vocabulary use, again, an indication that the student is able to devote more cognitive effort to using higher level vocabulary when they have the keyboard, and the same for ideas and organization. So, moving on, another area of transcription that we wanted to look at is the influence on spelling on composition. So this image, I think, is a great reminder of what often happens to some of our students who struggle with spelling. This is very typical of students who have high-level vocabulary. They have great ideas. They tell you something orally, and it's really rich and complex. And when they go to write it, they are substituting simplified words strictly based on their ability to spell those words. So some of the research about spelling, and it's linked to handwriting, it's linked to writing composition, is interesting that handwriting contributes to spelling and spelling contributes to handwriting in the elementary grades. So they have a bi-directional relationship. So the better you are at handwriting, typically, the better you are at spelling, and the reverse is true, that as students progress in spelling, their handwriting gets better. There's student spelling difficulties constrain how much and how well a student composes in the primary grades. Again, spelling is strongly linked to a student's ability to compose text fluently and plan and organize their ideas. Spelling and compositional fluency and quality are interconnected in the primary grades. So again, that's reiterating what we just talked about. And then compositional fluency and compositional quality are interconnected across all grades. So again, just influencing the importance of spelling and being able to get those words out in a fluent manner, and how that frees up working memory to allow students to focus on linguistic and other factors of writing composition. So some of the components of spelling that we look at, so these are all things that students need to have in order to become efficient spellers. First, phonological and phonemic awareness, so that basic letter-sound correspondence, one of the earliest stages that you see where students are able to record initial letter sounds and then ending letter sounds and so forth. Also, orthographic knowledge, so sound letter relationships and letter patterns and rules, so knowing that the K sound at the end of the word is typically CK and the K sound at the beginning of the word is never a CK. So some of that, being able to recall those mental images in their mind and commit those to memory. Vocabulary knowledge, so homophones and digraphs, things like to and to, T-O and T-O-O, understanding the differences in those and when to use which form of that word. Morphological awareness, so that understanding of root words, prefixes, suffixes, and those grammatical inflections, es and s for plurals, when to use which. This was one of the factors, if you look at the bottom of this slide, that morphological awareness was a very strong, one of the strongest predictors of spelling abilities, and also it has found to be a significant area of dysfunction in students with dyslexia, speech and language impairments, and articulation deficits. So it's extremely important for students to become proficient spellers, and it is an area that is of extreme difficulties to a lot of the students we support. So keeping that in mind. And then finally, semantic knowledge, the relationship between the base word and the related word. So how do you take what you know about the base word and the root word and use that to inform how you spell related words. So some evidence that you might see of deficits in one or more of these components are, of course, frequent spelling errors, also decreased writing fluency. So some of the research on writing has shown that writing happens in bursts. So a student will write for a burst and stop and think and plan and write for another burst. They found with students who had either handwriting and or spelling deficits that their writing bursts were shorter and the gaps between those bursts were longer. So they were spending more cognitive time thinking about how to form letters and getting them down on paper and how to spell words than they were doing actual writing. That also results in the next bullet, which is decreased quantity of writing, difficulty maintaining ideas and organization, limited variation in topic and sentence structure. Again, using those structures and vocabulary words, along with the last bullet there, the vocabulary words that they're used to using and know are comfortable and confident in spelling. I like the things of that nature. Another telltale sign of this is when a student, we talked about before, a student's oral presentation of their ideas greatly exceeds what they're able to actually get down on paper. So in order to evaluate spelling deficits, again, rely on your team members, your general education teacher or special education teacher. They likely already have information about a student's developmental spelling abilities, where they are, what progress that they've made and they're making. If that information isn't readily available to you, there are a couple of options for getting that information recorded to help you base some decisions about what types of supports to provide. A couple of those are, one would be Words Their Way, which is the research you see in the top picture there. And that's an informal spelling inventory. Another option is there are some spelling lists in the DeCoste writing protocol. Either of those options will help you pinpoint where students are along that developmental spelling continuum. Because those are both purchased products, we can't provide that information in this training. There is in the resource folder a free informal spelling inventory or spelling list to look at what might be grade level appropriate words for a student you could use. These are also, these next couple of slides look at examples of those developmental spelling stages. These stages have been widely researched and they are definitely documented and consistent in terms of what you see in the stages. The names of the stages might change depending on the resource you use. So whether you're looking at using Words Their Way or another spelling inventory, the spelling stage name will change, but the characteristics within those stages are very consistent and won't change. So because these are well documented in research stages, we were able to provide you with that information. If you want additional information on the other resources and exactly a resource to go through and actually do that spelling inventory, we can go over that during our face-to-face session next week. So this is the spelling stages continued. So starting with go back here, starting with students who are just doing random letter strings, that pre-phonemic spelling stage, all the way through conventional spellers, so spellers who can correctly spell all or most words. So, in summary, students need some form of writing that's legible, fluent, and demonstrates conventional spelling and grammar in order to allow their working memory to enlist cognitive resources for higher level writing. So in essence, the goal of completing those assessment processes that we just covered is to uncover those transcription deficits that might be impeding writing composition. So how might their handwriting and their ability to get that writing down on paper using a pencil be impeding their composition? How might their spelling and their current ability to spell be impeding their writing composition, their ideas? And how might their ability to keyboard influence their composition? And what we want to do is gather that information and use that to support us in locating appropriate tools to free up working memory for students to be able to really focus on the linguistic and planning and organization components of that writing process. So in future sessions, once we've collected this, gone through this assessment process, collected this information, we'll be connecting some of those needs that you've identified to specific tools then to provide your students with that support. And Jim is going to talk a little bit about how and where you document need for those supports.
Once you finally go through all of that work, why not just throw it away? Because you'll never have these students forever, so you always want to make sure that you document this information for other classrooms. Good grief, we've got transient kids all over the county. If they move from building to building, wouldn't it be nice to have kids with this information as part of their records? If they leave, they go to another district, they go to college, every accommodation that you provide for a student will carry over into the post K-12 environment without question. And so there's the why. As we go on and look at what needs to be documented, obviously your evaluation, if you have some writing samples, that could be very helpful. Certainly along with those samples, whether or not the student was successful with that. Obviously you have to have some measurement that quantity and quality has improved with the interventions that you're working on. And lastly, we want to know what the student thinks about all of this stuff. We have seen many students that we've provided a pretty high level of support for refuse to use it because they don't want to appear to be different. And that's unfortunate, but we have to continue working with them to improve that. Where do you document it? Clearly on the IEP, especially in the PLAAFP statement, we've got a sample that will follow. If they're a student under a 504 plan, it needs to be documented there. If you have a student study team or whatever you might call that group, it would need to be documented there again so we can go back to transferring information from one teacher to another, one school to another. So in this next slide, we've got an example of a student with a writing deficit. Clearly, the PLAAFP lists the strengths that the student possesses, and then it also spells out some accommodations in terms of what the student will need at a variety of times during his workday. Again, your ability to write these clearer or clearly will definitely influence who reads them when you're not there. Following that, under the supplementary aids and accommodations, this particular student needed to scribe to while doing his work and very specifically exceeded that was larger than 4 sentences, probably a paragraph. Whenever notes are needed, the student gets a copy. So we don't have to. The student wouldn't be expected to maintain note taking. It might be a good idea to have them paraphrase their notes once they get them done. Following that, spelling support. What is that going to look like when they're doing some independent work? Are they using a computer? Are they going to use a spell checker, personal dictionary, and so on and so forth? A word bank for this particular student was useful when they were expected to write to a topic. Again, all things that are very specific to the previous screen. Each student, of course, would be vastly different.
One thing to note about the how these were recorded in the accommodations section is that you notice that you don't see names of tools or specific software programs, and that's really intentional to provide flexibility. Sometimes a student outgrows the need for a support. Sometimes different supports become available that better meet that student's needs. Technology changes rapidly, and so just describing the qualities of that support a student needs without actually naming the tool is something that is quite helpful.
So where does that take us? You probably want to know everything tonight, but what will happen, by the time we get done, you'll be much more comfortable. You need to identify a student to assess. Some that obviously you look at their present work samples and they have legibility issues, or maybe not so much legibility issues if they're keyboarding, but their spelling is an issue. Find a student that we want to run through this assessment process, because there's nothing like getting dirty to figure out how this stuff really works. At our next face-to-face meeting, you'll be able to get a good look at what we're going to offer in terms of the written productivity protocol and the DeCoste writing protocol. And we also have an informal inventory actually in that shared resources folder and a brief description about the DeCoste writing protocol. Look at that information, kind of look, and then you can go back obviously and look at the slides, or if you want to watch the video, you can do that too. But understand the process that will need to take place so that you can accurately diagnose issues with your kids, and that can be helpful. Our next after our next face-to-face, of course, we're we obviously, based on this information, you will need to assess the student's handwriting and keyboarding information and their spelling abilities. That, of course, comes from those three options above. And then as we move on in life, we'll be able to identify those tools that are appropriate and useful. You want to start finding how that is. We won't tell you until the 1st of December, so you can worry and stay up late. But the point is, we have to get assessment down. We have to get an understanding of what those assessments will entail. Once we do that, then we can begin to look at tools. We never want to bring tools into the mix until we have an idea of what the heck we need to build.
And I'm going to take just a minute to pop out to this shared resources folder. Just make sure this link works. So you will have access to this slide presentation. Here's the flyer with the updated dates. But if we go into the session 1 folder, just so you know where to look and what you're looking at, here is our slide deck from today. So the resources information are in there. This is the informal writing inventory Jim referenced. What that is, again, it's just a really basic overview of that process that we just went through. There aren't norms provided. It's a pretty rudimentary tool, but it's one I've used and it does work. This folder here with the written productivity profile, I'll pop in there a second. So the written productivity profile, again, that's from that Hyatt, high incidence assistive technology team out of Maryland. This actually was also produced by Denise DeCoste when she was part of that team. So you're going to find that it very similar. There are a lot of similarities between this and the DeCoste writing protocol. This one is, again, freely available. It's right off of their website. It walks you through that same process again, gives you a little bit more detail and a little bit more formalized process or forms for recording that information. So that information is available for you there. I'm going to just go back and show you this, the intro to the DeCoste writing protocol. This is the product that is available for purchase. If you're interested in looking at this, if you think this is a tool that you need, that you'll be doing this process regularly with students, and supporting teams and identifying this information on a regular basis, I think this is a valuable tool. It's one that we can provide for you through participation in this training if you're willing to provide us with some samples of how you've used it and feedback. So, but it's a downloaded book. This introduction just gives you the table of contents. It reviews, I'm going to skip through the forward, but reviews an introduction to what this tool allows you to do. It also goes over what the differences are between this protocol and the written productivity protocol. So what are the major changes between this information and what's available in the freely available written productivity protocol from the Hyatt team. So we encourage you to check out the information in the folders here. Think about the students, think about how your role in supporting the team and gathering this information, and choose one that you think meets your needs and will support your team and your students in identifying, uncovering those transcription issues to help do some feature matching with our tools.
That writing protocol also has quite a bit of up-to-date research just helping you justify why you're going to do what you're going to do. And occasionally you need that to convince parents, and you might need it with your coworkers. It is quite a nice resource, and one that you might be interested in. Lastly, we will be looking at opportunities for introducing and trialing stuff, and I'm talking about where in a student's day can these supports be used. And so we'll look at that and when it can be used and how you coordinate with your parents and team, and of course the student. We can't leave them out. So you can see that we've got a face-to-face a week from today on the 10th, which happens to be the Marine Corps' birthday, if you're interested. We will look at that DeCoste writing protocol, words their way, and help you formulate a plan for student assessment. Again, that link, you saw the link for the handouts and resource today. We will have a link to the webinar very shortly, and that wraps up our webinar for today. Corinne, you have anything?
I do. Just a couple of reminders that dinner will be provided at the optional face-to-face follow-up. If you haven't already done so, if you plan on attending that follow-up, please make sure that you complete that Google form that was sent out. We need that so that we have accurate counts for our dinner presentation. Make sure you get something to eat while you're there. It's 3 to 5:15. All the face-to-face follow-ups are 3 to 5:15 here at the ISD. I believe those will be in the Lighthouse Lab. That information is available on the flyer. I think other than that, if you have questions between now and then, or if you're unable to attend the face-to-face but would like to talk with us more in more detail about any of these tools or resources that we presented today, feel free to get in touch with us. All right.
Thank you much.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
People say thank you. I'll stop the recording.